I call myself a dope fiend. If you are asking yourself, can I stop this? Then you're in a prison of your own mind. And I was in that prison.
Hollywood hides its darkest secrets well, but not today. These 20 black celebrities spiraled into drug addiction, losing everything in the process. Some made it back, others not so lucky. Stay tuned. Number 1 will leave you speechless. Number 20, Calloway. Imagine being so famous that even cartoon characters are inspired by you. Calloway was that guy. But behind the swingin' success, a secret battle with alcohol and marijuana that almost cost him everything. Stay tuned, this one gets wild. Calloway wasn't just a jazz legend, he was a cultural icon. His high-energy performances and signature dance moves lit up Harlem's Cotton Club in the 1930s. His music influenced generations, from the earliest jazz musicians to modern-day hip-hop artists. But what the crowd didn't see was his spiraling struggle with addiction. Back then, drinking and drugs were part of the nightlife scene, and Calloway indulged a little too much. While marijuana was his drug of choice, alcohol became a bigger problem. As his fame skyrocketed, his drinking got worse, affecting both his performances and personal life. Calloway was known for his sharp suits and larger-than-life stage presence. But behind closed doors, his substance use led to violent outbursts and risky behavior. He was even arrested multiple times for brawls and public disturbances. In one infamous incident, he got into a fight with jazz great Dizzy Gillespie, which ended with Calloway needing stitches. Biggest fun facts? First black performer on MTV? Nope, Calloway did it first in the 1930s. His dance moves inspired Michael Jackson's famous moonwalk. His addiction nearly destroyed his career, but he pulled through barely. Number 19, Louis Armstrong. Most people know Louis Armstrong for his raspy voice and jazz classics, but did you know he was one of Hollywood's first marijuana activists? This guy didn't just smoke, he campaigned for it, even when it was totally illegal. Louis Armstrong wasn't just a musician, he was a revolutionary. His sound defined jazz, and his voice became one of the most recognizable in the world. But Armstrong had another love besides music: weed. In the 1920s, when marijuana was demonized, Armstrong was already an open supporter. He called it the gauge, and smoked every single day, even before performing. While other celebrities hid their habits, Armstrong refused to be ashamed. In fact, he was even arrested in 1930 for possession. Instead of denying it, Armstrong laughed it off and kept smoking. He once told reporters that marijuana made him a better musician, helping him relax before big performances. Even when he became a global star, he refused to stop. Armstrong once said, "It really relaxes me and gives me that extra kick to get on stage and give my best." But Hollywood wasn't as accepting. When he met President Richard Nixon at the White House, Nixon unknowingly helped Armstrong smuggle weed inside. Armstrong asked Nixon to carry his trumpet case, which was secretly filled with marijuana. Nixon obliged, not knowing he had just helped one of the biggest jazz stars bring weed into the White House. Biggest fun facts? First major celebrity to be arrested for weed, way ahead of his time. Performed over 300 concerts a year, fueled by the gauge. Tricked a U.S. president into carrying his drugs. Number 18, Nat King Cole. Smooth voice, timeless hits, and effortless charm. Nat King Cole was the definition of class. But behind the microphone, he had a habit that even his golden voice couldn't save him from. And in the end, it took everything. Nat King Cole was a pioneer, breaking racial barriers in Hollywood and becoming the first black artist to host a nationally televised show. His music brought him fame, but his personal habits brought him closer to death. Cole was a heavy smoker, going through nearly 3 packs of cigarettes a day. He believed smoking made his voice smoother, a common myth among musicians of the time. In reality, it was destroying his health. But it wasn't just cigarettes. His alcohol consumption was just as dangerous. Even after being diagnosed with lung cancer in 1964, Cole refused to quit smoking. He continued recording songs while undergoing treatment, desperately trying to finish one last album before his time ran out. He even performed on stage with an oxygen tank nearby, determined to keep singing. Sadly, in 1965, at just 45 years old, Nat King Cole passed away. His addiction to smoking and alcohol robbed the world of one of the greatest voices in history. Biggest fun facts: first black artist to host a major TV show in America. Smoked 3 packs a day, believing it helped his voice. Refused to stop performing, even while battling cancer. Number 17, Dorothy Dandridge. She was Hollywood's first black bombshell, a trailblazer who shattered barriers. But behind the glitz and glamour, Dorothy Dandridge was drowning in addiction. And her final days? They were straight out of Hollywood tragedy. Dorothy Dandridge made history as the first black woman nominated for Best Actress at the Oscars. She was poised to become the next Marilyn Monroe, but Hollywood had other plans. Behind the scenes, she was being torn apart. Facing racism, abusive relationships, and financial troubles, Dandridge turned to alcohol and prescription pills to cope. By the early 1960s, her career had stalled, and she was struggling to pay her bills. Her drug addiction worsened after a devastating accident left her with chronic pain. She became dependent on painkillers and antidepressants, losing control of her life. In her final years, she was so broke that she was forced to sleep on friends' couches, a shocking fall for a former Hollywood star. Then, on September the 8th, 1965, Dandridge was found dead in her apartment. Officially, the cause was ruled a drug overdose, though some believe it may have been suicide. Either way, she became yet another Hollywood tragedy, gone too soon. Biggest fun facts? First black woman nominated for a Best Actress Oscar. Once turned down a movie role because they wanted her to act more black. Died broke and alone, despite once being one of Hollywood's biggest stars. Number 16, Billie Holiday. Her voice was pure magic, soulful, haunting, unforgettable. But behind the music, Billie Holiday was trapped in a nightmare of addiction, arrests, and heartbreak. And the way she spent her final days? It's one of Hollywood's darkest tragedies. Billie Holiday wasn't just a jazz singer, she was a legend. Songs like Strange Fruit made her a fearless voice against racism. But her real fight wasn't just against injustice, it was against heroin. Introduced to drugs at a young age, Holiday quickly became addicted. By the time she was a superstar, she was already hooked on heroin. Hollywood and the music industry did nothing to help. Instead, the FBI targeted her. In 1947, she was arrested for drug possession and sentenced to a year in prison. When she got out, they revoked her cabaret license, meaning she couldn't legally perform in clubs anymore. This destroyed her career. Still, she kept fighting until her body couldn't take it anymore. In 1959, Holiday collapsed and was hospitalized. Even on her deathbed, she was under police guard, accused of drug possession. The authorities literally waited for her to die. She passed away broke and alone, with just $750 in her bank account. Biggest fun facts? The FBI literally hunted her down for singing about racism. She was arrested for drugs while lying in a hospital bed. One of the greatest voices in history, silenced by addiction. Number 15, Charlie Parker. He was a musical genius, a pioneer, a legend. But Charlie Parker's heroin addiction was so extreme that when he died at 34, doctors thought he was 60. Yes, you read that right, 60. Charlie Parker changed jazz forever. His speed, technique, and improvisation were decades ahead of his time. But while he was revolutionizing music, heroin was slowly killing him. Parker first started using heroin as a teenager. By the time he was famous, he was completely hooked. He would show up to gigs high out of his mind, sometimes even passing out on stage. His addiction ruined his finances, his health, and his career. At one point, Parker was so broke that he pawned his saxophone just to get another hit. Friends tried to help, but he always went back to the drugs. His final days were tragic. In 1955, after years of drug abuse, his body completely gave out. He died in a hotel room watching TV. When the doctor examined him, he guessed Parker's age was 60. In reality, he was just 34 years old. Biggest fun facts? Doctors thought he was 60 years old when he died, but he was only 34. Pawned his own saxophone for drug money. Once got banned from Birdland, the club named after him, for being too high. Number 14, Richard Pryor. One of the greatest comedians ever, Richard Pryor had the world laughing. But behind the jokes, he was drowning in addiction. And then came the infamous night when he set himself on fire while freebasing cocaine. Richard Pryor wasn't just funny, he was fearless. He changed stand-up forever, turning personal pain into comedy. But behind the laughter, cocaine had him in a chokehold. In the late 1970s, Pryor was at his peak, selling out arenas, starring in blockbuster movies, but Hollywood didn't see what was happening behind the scenes. Pryor was freebasing cocaine daily, spending thousands of dollars on drugs. His binges lasted for days, sometimes weeks. Then, in 1980, it all exploded, literally. One night, while high on cocaine, Pryor doused himself in rum and set himself on fire. He ran down the street screaming as flames engulfed his body. Neighbors watched in horror. Miraculously, he survived, with third-degree burns covering half his body. Pryor spent months recovering. He later admitted it wasn't an accident. He did it on purpose, calling it a suicide attempt. That moment forced him to face his addiction. Though he eventually got sober, the years of drug abuse had already done damage. By the 1990s, he was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, and his health declined rapidly. Biggest fun facts? Once spent $7,500 a week on drugs. Set himself on fire while high on cocaine. Turned his darkest moments into legendary comedy. Number 13, Katt Williams. Brilliant, unpredictable, and always in the headlines, Katt Williams is a comedy icon. But his career? Well, it's been a roller coaster of arrests, erratic behavior, and bizarre public meltdowns. Drugs? Well, that's what many suspect. Katt Williams' rise was nothing short of meteoric. He went from underground comedy clubs to Hollywood success, starring in hits like Friday After Next and Wild 'N Out. But as his fame grew, so did his troubles. He started making headlines for all the wrong reasons: arrests, fights, and public outbursts. In 2012, he was arrested 4 times in 3 months. Once he led police on a high-speed chase on a 3-wheeled motorcycle. Then came the truly bizarre incidents: picking fights with kids, getting arrested in Target, and showing up late, or not at all, to his own shows. Many began questioning if drugs were behind his erratic behavior. Williams has denied being on hard drugs, saying that his actions are just a response to Hollywood's pressure. But his arrests keep piling up, and fans are left wondering, is he spiraling or just misunderstood? Biggest fun facts? Once fought a 17-year-old in a playground. Led police on a high-speed chase on a 3-wheeled motorcycle. Arrested over 20 times, often for bizarre reasons. Number 12, Bobby Brown. Had it all: fame, money, and one of the greatest voices of all time by his side. But Bobby Brown's addiction didn't just destroy his career, it played a role in one of the most tragic Hollywood love stories ever. Bobby Brown was the bad boy of R&B. As a solo artist and former member of New Edition, he had hit after hit. But his real-life drama overshadowed his talent. Drugs, arrests, and wild partying became the norm. He married Whitney Houston, and together they became one of the most dysfunctional couples in Hollywood history. The two fed off of each other's addictions: crack cocaine, heroin, and alcohol. Their relationship became a toxic disaster, documented in reality shows and police reports. Brown was arrested multiple times: DUIs, drug possession, and even domestic violence. He spent time in and out of rehab, but could never fully stay clean. Meanwhile, Whitney's own addiction worsened. Many blame Bobby for Whitney's downfall, but the truth? They enabled each other. After Whitney's tragic death in 2012, Brown finally attempted to turn his life around. He got sober, but the damage was done. He lost his wife, his daughter, Bobby Christina, and nearly his own career. Biggest fun facts? Arrested over a dozen times for drug and alcohol-related charges. His relationship with Whitney Houston became one of Hollywood's most tragic love stories. Survived his addiction, but lost almost everything along the way. Number 11, Michael K. Williams. You know him as Omar from The Wire, one of the most legendary TV characters ever. But Michael K. Williams' real-life battle with addiction was darker than any role he ever played. Williams was a powerhouse actor, famous for playing gritty, unforgettable characters. But what most people didn't know? He was living out his own struggles behind the scenes. For years, he battled a crippling heroin addiction. Even while filming The Wire, Williams would disappear between takes to buy drugs from the same dealers his character was chasing. He later admitted, "I was playing with fire. I was literally walking into dangerous places, high out of my mind." Despite his addiction, Williams managed to deliver some of TV's greatest performances. But in 2021, tragedy struck. He was found dead in his Brooklyn apartment from a heroin overdose. His death shocked Hollywood. Friends, family, and co-stars mourned, knowing that he had been fighting his demons for years. His story became yet another Hollywood cautionary tale. Even the strongest people can lose the fight. Biggest fun facts? Struggled with addiction while filming The Wire. Bought drugs from the same dealers his character was hunting. His overdose shook Hollywood, proving no one is immune to addiction. Number 10, DMX. From rap icon to Hollywood actor, DMX was unstoppable. But behind the growls and anthems, he was trapped in a cycle of addiction that started when he was just 14 years old. And it all ended in one final tragic overdose. DMX wasn't just a rapper, he was a movement. His energy, voice, and storytelling made him one of hip-hop's biggest stars. But while he was dominating the charts, his personal life was falling apart. At 14, a mentor tricked him into smoking crack for the first time. That one moment set him on a lifelong battle with addiction. Even as his career took off, DMX was in and out of rehab, arrested over 30 times, and struggled to stay clean. He tried over and over again. In interviews, he spoke openly about his demons. Fans hoped he'd finally turn his life around. But on April the 9th, 2021, DMX suffered a fatal overdose. The rap world lost a legend. His story is heartbreaking. A man who had the voice of a warrior, but the soul of a man fighting for survival. In the end, addiction won. But his music? Well, that lives on forever. Biggest fun facts? Tricked into smoking crack at 14 by someone he trusted. Arrested over 30 times for drugs, DUIs, and other charges. His funeral procession shut down streets. Fans loved him until the end. Number 9, Rick James. The king of funk, the wildest man in Hollywood, the reason for the phrase, "cocaine is a hell of a drug"? Rick James didn't just use drugs, he lived them. And his addiction led to some of the craziest stories ever. Rick James was one of the biggest rock stars of the 80s. His hit Super Freak made him a legend, but behind the music, cocaine had taken full control. James was spending $7,000 a week on drugs, sometimes even more. His wildest moment? In 1991, he and his girlfriend kidnapped a woman, kept her locked in his mansion, and tortured her while high on crack. Yes, that actually happened. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison, but even jail couldn't fully break his addiction. After his release, he tried to make a comeback, but struggled to stay clean. In 2004, Rick James was found dead in his home. The cause? A heart attack triggered by years of drug abuse. His legacy? A mix of musical genius and complete madness. Biggest fun facts? Once spent $7,000 a week on cocaine. Kidnapped a woman while high? Yes, really. His famous phrase, "cocaine is a hell of a drug," became a meme. Number 8, James Brown. He was the godfather of soul, a legend who changed music forever. But James Brown didn't just make headlines for his music, he made them for one of the wildest police chases in history. James Brown's energy on stage was legendary, but off stage, that energy was fueled by a dangerous mix of PCP, cocaine, and alcohol. His drug use led to erratic behavior, arrests, and violence. His most infamous moment? In 1988, Brown, completely high on PCP, stormed into an office with a shotgun. He then led police on a 90-minute high-speed chase across 2 states, swerving into traffic and crashing through barricades. After his arrest, Brown spent 6 years in prison, but even that wasn't enough to fully break his addiction. He was arrested multiple times after his release, often for domestic violence or drug possession. By the time he died in 2006, Brown's body was worn down from years of abuse. His official cause of death? Heart failure, but cocaine was still found in his system. Biggest fun facts? Once led police on a high-speed chase while high on PCP. Would perform for hours non-stop, likely fueled by drugs. Even in death, controversy followed. His body was reportedly missing for months due to family disputes. Number 7. Whitney Houston. Whitney Houston had it all: beauty, talent, and a voice like no other. But behind the glamour, drugs were destroying her. And in the end, addiction stole one of the greatest voices of all time. Whitney wasn't just a singer, she was a phenomenon. Every album, every song, pure perfection. But behind the scenes, her marriage to Bobby Brown became a drug-fueled disaster. Crack cocaine, heroin, alcohol, you name it, she used it. As her addiction worsened, her voice began to change. That once flawless voice, raspy, shaky, fading away, public appearances became erratic. She showed up disheveled, slurred her words, clearly high. By the 2000s, Whitney was a shadow of herself. She tried rehab multiple times, but always relapsed, and then, in 2012, tragedy struck. Whitney was found dead in a hotel bathtub with drugs in her system. Cocaine played a major role. Just like that, one of the greatest voices ever was gone. Biggest fun facts? Her famous Diane Sawyer interview, "Crack is whack," became legendary. Once spent weeks locked in her home doing drugs non-stop. Her addiction cost her millions and her legendary voice. Number 6. Sly Stone. He was a funk pioneer, a music legend who changed the industry. But Sly Stone didn't just lose his career. His addiction left him broke, homeless, and living in a van. Sly Stone was the mastermind behind Sly and the Family Stone, one of the most influential bands of the 1960s and 1970s. He had it all: money, fame, and groundbreaking success. But behind the scenes, drugs were destroying him. By the mid-1970s, Stone was completely hooked on cocaine and PCP. His drug use became so bad that he missed concerts, lost contracts, and ruined relationships. Promoters stopped booking him because he was too unreliable. The fall was brutal. By the 2000s, he was broke. He had burned through millions of dollars and lost everything. At one point, Sly Stone was literally living in a van parked on the streets of Los Angeles. A music icon reduced to nothing. How sad. In 2011, he admitted he was still struggling to stay clean. Though he received some financial help later in life, he never fully recovered. The drugs took everything from him. Biggest fun facts? At his peak, he was making $100,000 a show, then lost it all. Once disappeared for weeks on a drug binge, leaving his band stranded. Ended up living in a van, despite once being a millionaire. Number 5. Paul Mooney. He was the mastermind behind some of the funniest jokes in Hollywood. But while Paul Mooney made people laugh, he was secretly battling a cocaine addiction that nearly destroyed him. Paul Mooney was more than a comedian. He was a legend in comedy writing. He wrote for Richard Pryor in Living Color and Chappelle's Show. But behind his success, he was hiding a serious addiction. For years, Mooney used cocaine to cope with the pressure of Hollywood. He worked in an industry that was notorious for drug use, and Mooney fell right into it. His addiction was an open secret among comedians, but few people talked about it publicly. Even as he was making people laugh, his personal life was falling apart. His drug use caused financial problems, lost opportunities, and tension in his career. By the 2000s, Mooney had finally sobered up. He admitted that he wasted years of chasing a high instead of focusing on his talent. Though he managed to beat his addiction, the years of damage were already done. Biggest fun facts? Wrote for Richard Pryor while battling the same addiction. One of the most influential writers in comedy history. Got clean late in life, but admitted he lost years to drugs. Number 4, Martin Lawrence. Martin Lawrence was at the top of Hollywood, hit movies, a legendary sitcom, and a career that seemed unstoppable. Then, one day, he ran into traffic, waving a gun, screaming that people were trying to kill him. In the 1990s, Martin Lawrence was one of the biggest names in comedy. Martin was a smash hit, and movies like Bad Boys made him a Hollywood A-lister. But behind the scenes, something was seriously wrong. It all came crashing down in 1996. Witnesses saw Lawrence running through LA streets waving a pistol, screaming about being followed. The police had to restrain him and take him to a hospital. The diagnosis? Exhaustion, stress, and possible substance abuse. But that wasn't his only bizarre incident. In 1999, he collapsed in a coma after jogging in extreme heat while wearing a heavy tracksuit. Many suspected drugs played a role. Lawrence denied being addicted, but his erratic behavior told a different story. Despite these setbacks, he made a comeback. Bad Boys for Life was a hit, but the past left scars on his career. To this day, people still debate what really happened during his infamous breakdown. Biggest fun facts? Once ran through traffic with a gun, screaming about being watched. Collapsed in a coma while jogging in extreme heat. Despite everything, he revived his career in the 2000s. Number 3, Eddie Griffin. Eddie Griffin had everything: comic genius, blockbuster movies, and Hollywood's attention. But his lifestyle, his choices, and rumors of drug use cost him everything. Griffin was known for sharp comedy and outrageous personality. In the 1990s and early 2000s, he was everywhere. Undercover Brother, Deuce Bigalow, The New Guy. But as he quickly rose, he started to disappear. Why? Hollywood insiders say it was his attitude, drug use, and erratic behavior. Griffin was unapologetic, reckless, and outspoken. Some directors and producers found him too difficult to work with. Rumors swirled about his substance abuse. Though he never publicly admitted to being addicted, many insiders claimed it affected his career. He started making headlines for car crashes, lawsuits, and outrageous rants. Unlike others on this list, Griffin never fully crashed, but he did fall from Hollywood's A-list. He shifted to stand-up, focusing on smaller projects. He's still working, but far from where he once was. Biggest fun facts? Known for his wild lifestyle and unfiltered attitude. Rumored to have lost Hollywood roles due to his behavior. Still active in comedy, but nowhere near his former stardom. Number 2, Ray Charles. Ray Charles is a legend, a pioneer, a genius. But for years, he was also a full-blown heroin addict. And the way he finally quit? Brutal. Ray Charles wasn't just a great musician, he changed music forever. Blending soul, blues, and R&B, he broke barriers as a black artist in a racially divided America. But behind his success, he was hooked on heroin for nearly 20 years. He started using in the late 1940s, when heroin was rampant in the jazz world. It became part of his daily routine. Even as he made hit records, he was always high. And it showed. Charles was arrested multiple times for possession. In 1965, after his third drug bust, he faced serious prison time. The judge gave him a choice: go to rehab or go to jail. He picked rehab, but quitting wasn't easy. Charles went cold turkey, suffering through intense withdrawal. No medicine, no support, just pain and determination. It worked. He never touched heroin again. But his past addiction cost him relationships, money, and years of his life. He won the battle, but not without scars. He was Hollywood's first true rap icon. Movies like Juice, Above the Rim, and Poetic Justice prove that he wasn't just a rapper, he was a natural-born actor. But as his fame exploded, so did his demons. Surrounded by gang culture and the pressures of fame, Tupac turned to drugs, particularly weed, alcohol, and codeine. Friends and insiders reported that he started using ecstasy and even cocaine. The paranoia that came with his lifestyle only intensified his drug use. His legendary feud with the notorious B.I.G. and his involvement with Suge Knight's Death Row Records pushed him even deeper into chaos. By 1996, Tupac was riding high on success, but also deeper into danger than ever before. Then, on September the 7th, 1996, it all came crashing down. Tupac was shot 4 times in Las Vegas after a Mike Tyson fight. He fought for his life for 6 days before succumbing to his wounds on September the 13th. Some believe his drug use fueled his reckless behavior, leading to his tragic end. Biggest fun facts? Wasn't just a rapper, he was an actor, poet, and activist. Used drugs to deal with paranoia and the pressure of fame. Murdered in one of the most infamous unsolved killings in music history. If this shocked you, there's more. Check out our other deep Hollywood stories. Click here now. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Let's uncover more together. Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'm reading them all.